As you mentioned, Steve used to sing in the band, and the band for a while was known as Steve Miller's Delivery, which was apparently to capitalize on the fact that he was becoming well known on his own as a collaborator with Alexis Corner.
Well, that's right. But the reason that I think, just going back a little bit, and I'm not sure of the dates, Emery, and maybe you know better than I. And I think it was when Pip and I were still at Cambridge Tech, we ran a club at the Red Cow in Cambridge called Juniper Blossom Blues Club. In fact, no, we started it in the Rose pub on one side of the Market Square in Cambridge, and then the longer run was at the Red Cow in Cambridge, upstairs pub, and we booked bands like Ainsley Dunbar's Retaliation, Black Cat Bones with Paul Kossoff. I think we booked Fleetwood Mac, Pip and I, for 45 quid, and we made a lot of money that night, and we were thinking, you know, this is a good business to be in. I have to say, it was nearly all Pip's connections. I think he had some connections with booking agents. But yeah, he and I started it, and on one occasion we booked Alexis Corner, and we put ourselves on as well. And I think we played the first set just as Bruno's, and then Alexis played, and then we all got together. And Alexis loved the band. He especially loved Steve, but he liked the whole band, and he booked Steve, Pip, and I to do some gigs with him. Which, and I remember doing a couple of gigs with him, which were, you know, well. What happened with Alexis was, Alexis kept Steve on, but he gave Pip and I the sack because, well, I really hadn't been playing very long. Pip he'd been playing a bit longer, but not that long, and you know, we weren't up to snuff for him. And so the reason actually we met Alexis, as far as I remember, is because Pip and I booked him at the club in Cambridge, and then. Yeah, that's right. And then Steve was working, he continued, well, he was in that trio with Alexis and Robert Plant. And yeah, so I think that's right. And I don't know why we called it Steve Miller's Delivery, other than that, and there was, at that point, I don't think there was any confusion with the American Steve Miller, but it rolls off the tongue somehow, I don't know, so.
But in terms of dynamics within the band, was Steve the leader, or was it much more spread out?
In terms of music, one of my memories of it was very collaborative. It was, you know, and it was something that I just thought, oh, all bands are like this. But, you know, later on I discovered that far from it, you know. In fact, if anything, it is the norm to have a band leader or maybe two, or, you know, to have some kind of, you know, hierarchical structure. But I certainly remember, and certainly musically, when we were working on music, yeah, we'd collaborate. Everybody would throw in ideas. And it's really funny listening to hearing again Miserable Man from the record, because I remember I had a record that I think my sister sent back from the US, which was a Gil Evans record called A Shape of Jazz to Come or something. I can't know, it wasn't that.
Individualism of
That's it, I think it was. And it had a track on it called Las Vegas Tango, and we loved that. And so for me, that Miserable Man, now when I hear it, I can really hear it. I think it came out of playing that sort of tango rhythm, you know, which was a very kind of spaced out, kind of jazzy tango, but it was still a kind of a tango.
At the time, you were witness to the beginnings of Phil as a composer, although I don't know how far he was into becoming a composer. It was really early days, and as you said, you left before the band really started playing the whole repertoire that was on the album.
I certainly we played some of it for sure, but yeah. But then there was other things that I think, yeah, they did start to take off. I mean, Emery, I didn't think of any of us as composers, and not Phil, none of us. Mm-hmm. You know, we were just sort of throwing in ideas, and I certainly, it would have taken many years before I thought of Phil specifically as a composer, because of course Pip always had a lot of ideas as well. I don't think Steve, not so much on a compositional level. I think quite compositionally, I think structure-wise. So I think we did sort of chuck ideas around. No, but in terms of musical direction, I would say there wasn't, no, I don't think there was a leader, and I think the fact that it was called Steve Miller's Delivery, Steve was the oldest, I think, out of us. Well, he was, wasn't he?
Yes, by 6 years.
Yeah, and at that time, I forget, yeah, because at a certain point, when we were backing Lowell Fulsom and Otis Spann, Pip and I, especially remember it with Lowell Fulsom, we would drive Lowell in Pip's dad's car, or a Vauxhall car that had been new, but after 2 years it was sort of not very new anymore. But originally Steve was the driver of the van, and I think he was the only one insured, or maybe with a licence, I don't know. I certainly never drove it, and Pip didn't, I remember. Maybe Steve just didn't want us driving his van, I can't remember.